is Laura Foy, and I am your host for our weekly show, HipCat Society's weekly show, streaming live here on Facebook. And the show is called Do the Damn Thing, and our goal is to motivate, inspire, and really get those juices, those creative juices flowing for all of you solopreneurs and entrepreneurs out there who need a little boost, a little something to get you going. So each week we will be talking to people who have got it going, and they're going to share their wisdom with us. So this week I am talking to Joe Moller. Hi, Joe.
How are you doing today, Laura?
Joe Moller runs a boutique event production company based in Los Angeles. And Joe, how long have you been doing that?
Events altogether, almost 20 years. Joe Moller events since 2007, so better part of 13 years.
Very cool. And so as an event planner, do you have a specialty type of thing that you do? I know there's wedding planners, there's people who throw, Grammy Awards events. Do you have a niche?
I would say there's opportunities I stay away from. For example, weddings tend not to be projects that we work on frequently. We've done a couple. Most of my clients tend to be consumer brands that are Fortune 100 brands most people have heard of, and all of them have a need to connect with their consumer base in ways outside of their internal resources. L'Oreal, OPI, British Airways, Variety Magazine, Lexus are a couple examples.
Wow, that's nice. Now, I understand, a general idea of what you do and how long you've been doing it, but here's what I really want to know. Like, how did you get started? I know those of you at home may not be aware, but Joe and I have known each other for quite a long time. And we
were kids.
Since we were babies, exactly. And, we worked at a television network you may have heard of, called G4. And we were running around Los Angeles like crazy little kids. And at the time, not only were we both trying to try our hand in television, which I think is a rite of passage. If you live in Los Angeles, you must try your hand at television. But you were also kind of making a movie, right? So you had this Vegas thing going on. Tell us a little bit about that briefly.
So as you kind of mentioned, I've always been interested in creative projects. To your point about trying television, for me, I would compare that to the skeleton, right? Producing television shows, you have lighting and sound and props and catering and security and a lot of the same logistics that go into event production. So that's sort of how I learned the nuts and bolts of what I'm doing. The documentary project you're talking about, we had another colleague, Stephen, who collaborated with me he had a different name then, on a project that's still very interesting and dear to my heart. And Stephen brought this project to me, which was a documentary about a casino that was fully integrated at a time in American history where integration had not yet happened.
Right.
It had all the drama of Vegas, mafia, singers, dancers, celebrities, and at the time was a very attractive project. I think, to your point about trying entertainment, suffice to say, neither Stephen and I turned that into anything bigger than our own production, but it's still a project I look back on and I'm proud to be part of, and a body of knowledge I'm happy to know and talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of interesting, right? So basically everything you do and all of your past work experience, you've taken little bits and pieces of it, right? Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. And for anyone at home watching this who is unsure of starting in their specific project or doesn't know how to get started with their own business, look back at what you've learned and apply that to this new project. In my case, I wasn't smart enough when I started event production to know that I didn't know enough. I like going to parties. So I wanted to throw parties. And at the time in Los Angeles, pre-COVID, we were in a town full of events.
Right.
People would go to a party any day of the week for anything. So in my particular neck of the woods, I had access to a lot of things I could study and look at and see on TV and sort of try and reverse engineer. If you don't live in a part of the country where there's a lot of that stuff going on, turn to the internet, turn to Instagram, turn to Google, and really sort of just study what you're interested in. It's oftentimes not much more complicated than taking a few notes and saying, I think I can do this, which is really all I did.
Well, I mean, Tell me a little bit more about that. So, like, how did you get started? You're in LA, and you're like, I like going to parties. I want to go to parties. But I mean, most people would think that you need to know somebody, you need to have a lot of money, you need to have some master business plan. Like, how did you get started?
I will say that at the time I started, there was not the body of education, there was not the ability to get a degree in event production or a lot of
Can you
the
get a degree in
education.
that
I think so. People in my industry have three letters and dots after their name, and I know they're not dentists, so I'm assuming
now?
something.
Just add it
Uh,
after yours.
not to disparage that track. If you are someone who thrives in an educational environment, I've in fact gone to universities and spoken as featured speakers in front of students learning about event production. So if that's how your brain works and you like instruction and taking notes and an academic approach, find a night class, find an online class in today's world, and sign up and pay attention.
Right.
In my case, as funny as it sounds, I did have a friend who was involved in the industry, and much like the productions that we worked on, I took that skill set and said to this guy, hey, I want to do more of this with you, and kind of worked my way up through the different facets of event production. So almost what you would call an internship today.
Okay.
I learned and working with different experts. Again, much like television production, there's a guy who's in charge of furniture rental. There's a woman who's in charge of drapery. There's a woman who runs a catering company. There's all of these people in your local market. Reach out to them and ask if you can shadow them for a day. Ask if you can work for them for a day. So I'm not the first to admit I'm not a doctor. The nature of the work I do is very creative, and I like to think that's what's propelled my agency forward. But at the same time, it's very simple. I joke with most people that I rent couches for a living.
Hold on a second, Joe. I'm looking at your website here now. This looks a lot like Britney Spears. Is that Britney Spears? Is that Britney Spears in your website?
Story. Her father, who, by the way, should not be conservator anymore, free Britney, is, for those of you who are following it, that's not a joke, was an interesting dude. I met him because he was friends with the Maloof family who owns the Palms Casino. Maloof family was a client, and one of the Maloofs enjoyed the cooking from Mr. Spears. So very quickly on in that relationship, I learned you don't need a fancy big name caterer to provide your clients with the type of food they're looking for. And that was a really valuable lesson to me, because I think the industry standard is to turn to the big name, the fancy name, the established institution, and your client base may not need or be able to afford that. So one of the tools that I use that I think has been really important is understand that not every solution works for every problem, and have more than one solution prepared. And you don't have to have caviar and escargot for dinner every night to successfully serve that to a client who likes it. It's a lot of listening. It's a lot of learning. I've definitely been more educated through this career path than I brought into the job in the beginning.
So what you're saying is you kind of go for it and hope for the best?
That's another way of looking at it. Or there are things in life in my early 20s that I hadn't eaten before. And just because I didn't know what it was doesn't mean somebody didn't want to pay me to get it. So you have to it's really not about what Joe likes all the time. It's about what person A is hiring Joe to do. And I have to find person B that sells it, makes it, cooks it, and connect the dots.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because that's a common thread. Weaving together a lot of industries, especially the marketing industry, the industry I'm in, because you have to learn that it's not necessarily about what you like. It's really tapping into your target audience and finding what they like, right? Or what your client likes. Because as much as I want it to be all about me, what I like doesn't really matter, and probably doesn't sell, because if it was up to me, I'd have In Sync playing on loop over and over again. So, that being said, you've done some amazing work. So who's the creative mastermind behind these things?
I definitely take a lot of pride in the original ideation. So you'll see some pictures at specific houses that we all recognize. You'll see brands like L'Oreal brought to life in clear lucite trunks. I'll be given a project. We're launching this widget. We want to send these messages. And then it's my job to translate that text-based communication into a real-life visual. In some cases, it's making giant foam letters. In other cases, it's making clear letters that glow in the dark that we fill with product. In other cases, there are no letters involved. So really, the opportunity I have is to take someone's email or text or phone call and bring it to life. The best way I can explain that is it's like playing with Legos, except I have to put all the pieces together I don't have a road map oftentimes.
All right, now, Joe, you throw parties for a living. You throw events, glamorous, beautiful events that, some people can only dream to go to, and that's your day-to-day. So if you put that glamorous stuff aside, what's the hardest part of the job?
I'll say this, for anyone who's in a traditional W-2 employment capacity in any format now, you have one boss. You learn English once. If that person tells you great, if that person tells you that's horrible, you begin to understand as you develop that relationship what they mean. I tell people I have to learn English 900 times a year because even though every client uses the same words, this is great, that's horrible, I love this, I don't really like that, I have to translate what those really mean because even though they're expressing it in simple terms, they don't always have the same implication. So one of the big challenges with new clients and even existing clients is learning to speak their language, learning to listen and learning to translate. Oh, she's telling me she likes this, but I can see in her face she does not.
Yeah, I would think that's tough. That's like going on a first date over and over and over again, but never getting to know the person.
Except I never have to pay for dinner.
Now, I would think that you do have to pay for dinner. I mean, isn't your industry all about schmoozing?
Oh, in that capacity, yes. But in the event-client relationship, a double-edged sword is you're spending someone else's money. So if you're recommending balloons or flowers or chairs or couches, and it's a great idea to you, but when they get there, they don't like it, you are now responsible for that mistake. And unlike working as part of a larger team, if you're a micro enterprise, a solopreneur, there's no one to blame.
Right. And that's an excellent point. Nobody can do everything by themselves, right? As much as we want to be, self-sustained and I can do it all, at the end of the day, you're probably, as you grow, going to have to hire somebody because,
Correct. And you don't want to do it all because that means you're not very good at one thing because the opportunity cost is you're decent at a lot of things. So for anyone looking to enter this industry, figure out what your good thing is. If you have a great sense of floral design, you can pick florists that really get you. If you are a foodie, find caterers that offer unique culinary experiences. If you are, in my case, I love artwork, I love Legos, I like the idea of building things. So my skill set, I compare oftentimes to a general contractor. I'm not framing the house, I'm not running the electrical wire, I'm not the plumber, but I know how to manage all of those people. So at the end, we build the house that the client's looking for. And that's a lot of times how I explain when I'm speaking at other opportunities, how event production works. You're not always moving furniture, you're not always fluffing pillows, you're very rarely pouring drinks, but you're accountable for all of that. So you need to understand what that expectation is, what a great Manhattan looks like. You don't have to drink, but you have to understand what it is that you're selling.
Oof, sounds stressful.
According to Forbes magazine, event production is in the top 5 stressful careers.
And did you know that prior to going in?
I knew less than most people when I started.
So you didn't know what you didn't know, and you just did the damn thing.
I mean, to that point, there's, I say this frequently, there's no force in the universe stopping you from being successful. So when I wanted to get in this, I had a relationship with someone who was doing it already, and I just reached out and said, I want to do this. He knew I had no experience. I knew I had no experience, but I didn't let that lack of a building block allow me to move forward. I figured out how to get the experience. So if you have a day job, offer to work at your local academic center, your local religious center. There's a lot of people outside of COVID who have a need for support staff. And that's a great way to see how things work. On the other side of the coin, I joke with people, if you can make dinner for 4, that doesn't mean you can make dinner for 40. So be aware of the limitations of your knowledge. If someone had told me that, I probably would have been more successful sooner. I stumbled through a lot of, to your point, one person can't do everything. One person shouldn't tell a big client, sure, you can deliver 8 pallets of champagne to my house. That's a lot of moving and boxing and unboxing. So there's a lot of times where I look back where I think if someone could see what I was doing, they would not only laugh, they would feel bad for me.
Oh, poor Joe.
I mean, when it's 100 degrees outside and you're moving 800 boxes of champagne that have 6 bottles each by yourself, that's an all-day project, as it turns out.
Understood.
And then you have to move them back outside after you move them in, which is the other part of that problem. So, but to that, to your point now, there are resources like TaskRabbit, Fiverr. There are so many more solutions available to the micro enterprise. I can't tell you how impressed I am when I see smaller companies coming up using all these app-based technologies to put their team together until they've developed more resources for a larger team. I'm at a point now in my career where I joke with people, I have 150 years of experience because I have 3 50-year-old vendors. So you want to build up, level up slowly, but you also want to look at what the big companies are doing. I follow several of my competitors and colleagues online, and I'm oftentimes impressed with things I see. And then I can figure out how much they spent, and I know that one day I'll have budgets that big.
Yeah. Now let's talk about that real quick. So you mentioned online. We'll talk about your first party after this because I think you had a pretty amazing start. But what is your social strategy? Do you have a social strategy? Do you focus online? I mean, obviously you have a website, but do you have more of like a social media strategy?
My social strategy has always been to use Instagram as a vehicle for communicating concepts and images. My theory is that an organization like Microsoft or Toyota, when they are looking for people in my capacity, will look at the style vocabulary I've developed. How does he serve alcohol? How does he serve food? What does the decor look like? They're not looking for their solution. They're looking for someone who can understand and implement their idea of themselves. So my social media pages are oftentimes populated with images that are in high contrast to each other, images that are not redundant, because I don't think my core client base is scrolling through 800 pictures to find their favorite one. I think they're very quickly scanning and saying, okay, he's technically capable. Now let me communicate with him to see if he's the right fit. So with that as my sales funnel, my strategy has been to use diverse images, to use images that I own and images that I've created from my events, because I want people to see it through my lens, to understand that I can do what they need me to do. There are small agencies who reach out to me every day for SEO optimization, for content building. I don't feel like that's necessary in order to gain new clients. I feel like that's an opportunity that if you had those resources, spend that extra money on your first event. Tell your clients whose budget is X that you spent X plus so they could have better flowers. Right. If they are having a hard time making a decision, I'll offer to pay for it if I believe in it enough, because I know at the end I've developed a long-term relationship. So until you have additional resources to invest across the board, my recommendation is invest in your relationships and then document those on social. Don't start with investing in social till you have a relationship to share.
Right. For those of us just joining us, my name is Laura Ford. I'm hosting Do the Damn Thing, inspiring and motivating new entrepreneurs. And my guest today is Joe Moller, who runs Joe Moller Events, a boutique production company in Los Angeles. He's got a lot of great stories that we will dive into in just a moment. But if you have any questions, this is live and this is interactive, so please feel free to go ahead and type those in, and we will answer any questions as they arise. So Joe, let's get back to this. I want to talk about your first event. We're talking about, we're trying to get people to get started, and where do they start and how do they do it? And a lot of it, I think, is mindset. A lot of it is just, like you said, either having some innate faith in yourself that you can do this and you don't know any better, or you do have the experience. Maybe not me and not you, but maybe there's people who had experience prior to just jumping in head first. That's a route that some people may take, yes. And that's great too. But there's still that question of like, where do I go from here? So talk about your very first job.
So I am very lucky, and I've been able to harness that luck into a long, successful career. My first clients happened to be a recording artist and producer by the name of Dr. Dre and his business partner, Jimmy Iovine. And this was at a time in the LA landscape where events happened regularly. They happened in large formats, and getting invited to a party was cool, but it wasn't anything unique. In the case of Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine, that, as they still are, in my own perception, are in their own league.
Right.
And I was able to collaborate as much as I had input with either of them on how some of the parts of the event worked. And these are titans of industry. These are people who know what they want and know what they don't want.
How did you get to them? Did you call Dr. Dre?
No, you don't call Dr. Dre, ever.
Oh.
Through a series of relationships.
Okay.
Right place, right time.
Gotcha.
And to that point, and to the name of the show, you got to be at the intersection for someone to find you. So put your name out there, put your Instagram up, put your make your social channels active, be available. When the phone rings, answer it.
Right.
And eventually you'll get one of those calls. It may not be day one, but if you got to show up to be lucky.
Right. And maybe start small. Like don't expect Dr. Dre on day one.
I mean, expect Dr. Dre on day one, but be ready for whoever comes in line ahead of him if he's not reaching out. So great places to start, as I mentioned earlier, are local religious centers, schools, your own social network, places of employment. You could be something as simple as planning your own dinner party at home and taking pictures of it. It could be something as simple as cooking with friends and documenting that process. Again, there's no force in the universe stopping anybody from being successful. If you're constantly waiting for that big picture client or that celebrity to call you,
right.
All you're doing is nothing.
Right.
So if you're doing nothing, do something. And whatever that something is, somebody will be interested in it if it looks good.
It's interesting that you say that because I was on Instagram recently and I found The Life of a Digital Marketer. I'm constantly on Instagram. People are like, you're on your phone. I'm like, it's my job. Anyway, I'm sure the same goes for you. So I was scrolling through and I found this company that's my dog. Very live shows. So anyway, I found this company that literally throws dinner parties like out in outdoor spaces, in fields, in
outstanding in the field.
Pardon?
Outstanding in the field.
Is that what it's called?
Yes.
I don't remember the name of it, but I was like, this is so great. And then like that could be somewhere that someone who doesn't have a connection with Dr. Dre could get started, like just do your own thing in your backyard, take beautiful pictures.
What's interesting to me about that organization and that example, in terms of their style vocabulary, they are very pared down. It's a folding brown chair. It's banquet tables. They could be plastic. They could be old.
They're beautiful.
It's simple white linens, but what makes them so impactful is the scale of what they do. They did an event in Santa Monica, California, where they had one long white linen table on the pier. There was no design component to it, with all due respect, but it was such an impactful event to be at because it was a large format gathering. Obviously, in today's day and age, that's not your most likely first client.
Right.
But the idea of taking very simple tools and creating a shared moment around them is sort of the DNA of every event. It could be the biggest, most expensive wedding. It could be the smallest baby shower. Ultimately, people in my position are tasked with creating those moments and those experiences. So even if you've never been to a baby shower, even if you've never been to a huge dinner party, think about what's important. What is that DNA? People want to connect. They want to have conversation. They want to remember the moment. Pro tip number one, don't use tall flowers on dinner tables because you can't see your guests. So when you see these very dramatic wedding pictures and huge, gigantic flowers, notice what's going on at the table height. That separates the pros from the novices.
Right.
If you tell your client we want all these candles and he or she sits down and can't see anybody, you failed. And nobody cares what the candles look like if that's all they can see. So really find those great examples, use Instagram and take a lot of notes. Look at the detail. If you don't know the tiniest details are important, it doesn't matter. You're never going to get the big opportunities.
Right, absolutely. Now, do you have any, I know we're short on time, but do you have any failures that you want to share with us? Things that you...
Here's a hard lesson that I think about often. I was very eager to engage an entity that was a much smaller entity than mine. They were in a different part of the country. And in my eagerness to engage and work with them regularly because I saw their future potential, I didn't thoroughly read the agreement that the client sent back to me. And sorry to sound misogynistic, she had manipulated the agreement to a very one-sided situation. That was a huge red flag. Instead of listening to my inner voice and not signing it and walking away, I signed it, and sure enough, we had a huge problem. The problem was not one that I caused, but it became one that I was responsible for. So make sure, you don't have to be a lawyer, but make sure your contracts are solid. And if someone changes it, ask them why.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been bitten by that myself. I don't like reading contracts. It's like I feel that they write them in language that no one can understand, so I have to hire an attorney, and it's just big racket. So I just sign it and hope for the best. Anyway, I want to talk real quick about coronavirus, COVID-19, and how that's affected your business. A lot of people are moving to the online space, both professionally, personally, and I would imagine the same, for their careers and for your job. So how is this affecting your business?
Prior to COVID happening, I was on the road 11 months out of the year. Sometimes I was home a week or two, only a month. Obviously, when the pandemic started, all that ended.
Yeah.
There's a lot of movement, and the word, pivoting comes up in this industry as it does all over the place. People are trying in Los Angeles to do these drive-in concepts and all of these sort of knee-jerk responses. Honestly, I don't believe in that. I worked really hard to get where I am professionally. My reputation management is extremely important to me. So I don't want to be looked at as a company that now, after almost 20 years in business, is doing virtual weddings or is doing drive-ins. That's not what we're good at. That's not my skill set. So I've waited patiently. I've maintained client relationships by checking in with people, not asking for work, just asking how they're doing. I've managed to keep up our social, sharing old images or, cute memes like everyone else. And slowly but surely now I'm getting requests for proposals, and we're doing some small mailer projects for big companies. But that still allow us to put our fingerprint on the experience. So if you believe in yourself and you've been a prudent business owner, you've got some savings, these are the times you use it, and hope for the best, but plan for the worst. And as corny as that sounds, if you haven't done that from the beginning of your business, you're not managing yourself the same way you're managing your clients. And that's really something to pay attention to.
Awesome, Joe. Well, we are out of time. I want to thank you very much, and I wish you the best. And for everyone out there who is interested in getting started in business, we're going to do this every single week with different entrepreneurs, different solopreneurs, and we'll be giving advice and tips for how to get started and do the damn thing. So please like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and hit up joemoller.com if you're looking to throw a fabulous event. And we'll see you next week. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.